everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Nikita, and on this channel we focus on inclusion of BIPOC stories, especially South Asian stories in literature and in real life. So you can expect a lot of book chats, book recommendations, as well as my podcast called Brown People Problems. So for today, I wanted to chat about the books that I've read in the month of June. I happened to read 13 books. 13 books, and one of them was a DNF, so I guess finished 12 books, but I read 13 books this month, and let's chat about what they were. Alright, my very first read of the month was a 5-star read, and that's just always a very rewarding feeling, isn't it? So first I read The Late Mrs Willoughby by Claudia Gray. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this book. This is a sequel to The Death of Mr. Wickham by obviously the same author, and this is a Jane Austen murder mystery retelling type of a situation. If you're not familiar with this series, it is absolutely incredible. It is literary fiction, and it's written quite like an Austen novel, so it does take some time, at least it did for me, to get through it, but it's absolutely incredible. This takes place in a world where essentially all the Austen characters know one another. Basically, all these characters know one another, and some sort of a murder happens. This author seems to really be systematically taking out all the villains from the Jane Austen novels. The first one was about Mr. Wickham, the villain from Pride and Prejudice. And this is about the wife of Mr. Willoughby, who I believe was the villain from Sense and Sensibility with Marianne Brandon, if I'm not forgetting my Austens. But anyway, this is absolutely hilarious. If you like your Agatha Christie's, if you like your Austens, you would actually really like this. It's a very, very nicely told historical murder mystery with a little bit of a budding romance between two young detectives who are the children of the characters. So you've got Jonathan Darcy, who's a son of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and then you've got Miss Juliet Tilney. She's the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Tilney from the Northanger Abbey. I can never remember their first names, but it's absolutely incredible, and I'm already waiting for the third one to come out. Hopefully there's a third one, I'm not too sure. After that, I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I have been seeing this book everywhere. I've been hearing everyone talk about it. I just never picked it up because nothing really appealed to me about it, and also it was only available in hardback, and I don't like hardbacks. I like paperbacks. I prefer paperbacks. But I think recently I saw that they have a paperback version now of The Bodyguard, and I'm going to pick it up. But it was such a pleasant surprise. This book is a clean romance, really, which focuses on this male celebrity, and then you've got a female bodyguard. That already captured my interest because with romances where one is a bodyguard, it's almost always the man. And it was actually really, really funny. The romance was just lovely. The storyline was great. But essentially, our female character gets hired by the male celebrity's PR team. But she has to hide the fact that she's a bodyguard because he has to go visit his mom, who I believe is sick. And so he doesn't want her to know that she's her bodyguard. He doesn't want to worry her. So they pretend to be a couple while they are staying for a few weeks with his mom and his family. And I thought the banter was great. I thought the storytelling was great. I give it 4 stars, which for me is a high rating on romance books. Usually I give about 3.5, unless it's an Emily Henry book, then I definitely give a little bit more. But it was actually really lovely. I really enjoyed it. And next week, hopefully, I'm going to be picking up the new book by Catherine Center. Next up, I read The Perfumest of Paris by Alka Joshi. This is the 3rd book and the last in the Henna Artist trilogy. I don't have the copy on me, lent it out to someone, but I was really looking forward to it because I really enjoyed the Henna Artist, and I really enjoyed The Perfumist, the Secret Keeper of Jaipur. I don't know if The Perfumist of Paris did the same thing for me. I definitely felt it was a bit unnecessary. Maybe I didn't need to know Radha's story. I'm not sure. I may also be really biased. For those of you who have read this, the other 2 books, you may feel differently about this character, but for me, Radha was not a favorite character of mine. And this book is primarily just about her. And it was not my favorite. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I definitely think Henna Artist was the best in the series, and then The Secret Keeper of Jaipur was definitely the second best. I would have just been happy with those two. But it's still worth checking out if you want to wrap up the series nicely for yourself. But I certainly think that it could have been a little bit better. Okay, next up, because it was the Indigenous History Month here in Canada, I wanted to read a lot more Indigenous authors. And that's obviously a goal that's just not relevant to that month. I'm going to be making that intention for the rest of the year. But I read this month Daughters of the Deer by Danielle Daniel. And this book blew me away. I gave it 4.5 stars and I really enjoyed it. I believe this author, this story is like loosely inspired by her own ancestry and her own heritage. But it basically follows, I believe it's set in the 1700s, if I'm not wrong, or the 1600s, sorry. And it really follows the story of these women from an Aboriginal tribe and French settlers in what is now modern day Quebec and Montreal area. Essentially, it's about this girl who was murdered, a young girl who was murdered by French settlers. And if you're not quite familiar with the Indigenous history of Canada, essentially it was originally the French who came and they occupied Canada while the Aboriginal peoples were here. And there was definitely just like a lot of like a genocide and massacre and just so much trauma that the Aboriginal communities are still kind of experiencing today. But essentially, there was a conversion of women from those communities that had to marry a lot of the French settlers, and there was this like slow erasure of their cultural identities and their own heritage. And so this is like a sort of a multi-generational story. It follows our main character from when she is a teenager to her 20s, her 30s, her 40s, and her own children. And it was just so beautifully told. It was obviously really heartbreaking. I mean, I don't know if it's possible to read a lot of these stories and books and walk away from it not feeling heartbroken, but that shouldn't deter us from engaging in these stories. It was actually just so beautifully told, and just talks about the role that the church had to play in erasing identities of Indigenous folks. Started off with their names, then changed their lifestyle, their habits. They were mandated to go to church, and it's just like they kept losing parts of themselves. Our main character also, she was forced to learn and speak French by her husband in the home, as opposed to her native tongue. So, you know, I think we all have a high level, or a lot of us have a high level understanding of what kind of happened and what the bloody history of Canada has been. But books like these really zoom in into the experience of an individual, because you can relate to a story on a high level and know the facts, but I think to really absorb the impact of what happened, we need to zoom into individual stories. And so I honestly thought it was actually incredible. Definitely check that one out. I'm going to be picking up a hard copy soon. I also wanted to finish Five Little Indians by Michelle Good. I have started it, but I gotta say this book has just been really hitting me hard. So I've been taking my time with it. I could not finish it for this video or in the month of June, but you'll definitely be hearing about it in my July wrap up. And it's actually already really incredible, but it's just emotionally a very hard-hitting book, so I'm taking my own time with it. All right, up next I read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I gave it about a 3.5 stars. It was okay. There's a lot of hype around it, so I gave into the hype and I got a copy on my Kobo. And to be honest, the twists and turns were quite predictable. It was very atmospheric. I like the fact that it was atmospheric. It's the kind of book that you can take on a vacation if you're going to like a cottage or in the fall time for like a long weekend. or just the normal weekend. You can finish it. It's a quick read. But it essentially follows our main character, Alex, who has always wanted to be a writer. And she has this one writer who's really popular, and she really looks forward to, and she really looks up to that writer. This celebrity writer, she launches this writing retreat at her cabin. She lives in this like really secluded area. She's a very secluded, mysterious personality. And she creates this writing competition where people have to submit their short stories, and if they get selected, they get to come and stay with her at her estate for a month for not just an opportunity to spend time with her, but to also train with her on how to be a better writer. And the person, I believe, at the end of it won like a 6-figure contract or 7-figure contract or something like that. But obviously, because it's a mystery, they get there and people start disappearing and things start happening. I really, really liked the premise. I thought that was really good, but everything else, for me at least, was predictable. I have read a lot of mystery and thrillers and psychological thrillers, so there isn't much now, I think, that shocks me or takes me by surprise. So it was okay, but it wasn't my favorite. After that, I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is also another book I gave in to the hype. I ignored it for a long time. I ignored the hype for a really, really long time because I was mistaken. It was my bad. I thought it was a YA, and I'm wanting to take a bit of a break from YA. But it's actually literary fiction. It's great, and it has romance as a subplot, which is exactly what I enjoy. And everything that you've heard about this book is 100% true. All the hype is real, and this book is massive, but I still finished it very quickly. I want to say in a couple of days, and this book left me broken. It was so good, but it was very, very heartbreaking. But I still would recommend it to everyone. It was heartbreaking in a, I'm gonna be a little bit upset for a few days, but I also really don't regret it type of way, if that makes sense. But this was really incredible. It's essentially about two main characters, Sam and Sadie, who meet at the Harvard campus. It starts in like mid-90s, and it follows them throughout their life and their journey and their friendship and their love. And it's mainly around their relationship as video game developers. And it sounds like not good when I say that. And that was part of the lack of appeal for me, I guess. It didn't feel very interesting when I read or when I heard, oh, they're video game developers, not something that I know how to do, not something that I relate to, not something that interests me. But there is little to no focus on like the technical side of coding and developing. So if you're afraid of any of that, don't be afraid. There was a huge focus, of course, on developing like video games and their creative process, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really cool. And of course, the general story around it, the romance, the heartbreak, the growing up, the coming of age. It was actually really, really incredible. I am planning on rereading this at some point, but I'm recommending this to everyone. 5 stars. It was actually really, really worth it. After Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I was so heartbroken and I was really emotionally hit hard. I needed to read something that was just more fluffy and fun and a light read. So I picked up The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. This was my very first Lynn Painter. I thought it was a cute story. It's essentially about these two people, Hallie and Jack, who create a wager to see who's gonna fall in love first, or who's gonna have a relationship first. And lo and behold, they end up falling in love with one another. But it was funny. It was fun. I enjoyed Lynn Painter's writing. I gave it about 3.5 stars. It was nothing groundbreaking for me when it comes to romance. I just don't know if my expectations are skewed when it comes to reading romance. I am relatively new to the genre, but it was good. It was fun. Nothing to write home about. Not usually how I feel with my Emily Henrys. I really enjoy those. They're more emotionally rich. This one wasn't, but it was like a fun beach read, quick vacation read. I enjoyed it. After that, I unfortunately had to DNF. Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. I just did not enjoy it, and it was a YA, and I think I just need to realize now that I'm past my YA phase. It's not a genre that speaks to me anymore. I DNF'd it about 35%. I gave it 2 stars. A lot of people really rave about it, so I certainly felt bad DNFing it, but I am interested in picking up other books by Talia Hibbert. I find that YA romances, or most YA books now, just feel very bare and lacking in the type of like emotional complexity or the plot complexity that I'm looking for now. And so it wasn't a bad book, it's just not what I want now. And so I just DNF'd it. After that, I read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is a book that's been sitting in my pile for a while after I read The Love Hypothesis a few months ago, I believe. Not last year, no, definitely this year. But this is essentially about Bee and Levi, who are scientists at NASA. So she is a neuroscientist and he's an engineer, and they have to collaborate on a project for astronauts developing these types of, I think, helmets. And what I really loved about this book, that this was the perfect mix of that academic atmosphere that Ali Hazelwood sets for her characters and the romance. So it wasn't too academically heavy, it wasn't too romance heavy, it was just right in the middle. I really enjoyed the fact that we didn't get to the romance till like halfway in the book, and a lot of people may not like that, but I really enjoyed that. The plot was really rich with things other than romance. I definitely do have my qualms with this book, and especially with Ali Hazelwood. I am making a video on red flags and romance books later on this month, so definitely keep your eye out for that. But I'm just not happy with the fact that all of Ali Hazelwood's men are built like a fridge and have this, not toxic masculinity, but are so overly masculine. It would be nice to see some sort of diversity, but I actually really liked it. And this is definitely my favorite out of her 3. I did read the 3rd one, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but this was definitely my favorite one out of all of her 3 STEM romance novels. I gave this 4 stars. Up next, I read Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. This is actually the prequel to Love Wager, but I read this after because you don't have to read them in sequence, I gathered. But this was not for me. I read it, but I gave it 3 stars. Love Wager, which was 3.5 stars, was definitely better for me. This one, I just couldn't care. I couldn't care much. I couldn't care much for the characters. This just felt like, you know, that typical trope. The guy is very cool, collected, rich, calm, and the girl is a hot mess. And I think I'm tired of that pairing, and I'm tired of just that portrayal of women in romance. And I need something different. So maybe it was just my own difficulty in putting aside my frustration. But I finished it. I made my way through it. It was okay. But essentially what happens is it's about 2 characters, Olivia and Colin. And essentially one day Olivia gets a message from a wrong number that says, "What are you wearing?" And so it basically starts this interaction and this conversation between these 2 people. And then once they actually find out each other's real identities, it's like a whole reveal because they already knew each other from the beginning. But that aspect of it was fun. But yeah, it was nothing, again, incredibly amazing. It was a fun, quick read. After that, I was able to read and complete A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 2 in A Court of Thorns and Roses. I read Akatari 7 years ago and I really enjoyed it then, so I'm rereading the series to see if I like them just as much, and I still do. I still gave this 5 stars again. Akatar is absolutely incredible. I love this series. It's the perfect amount of fantasy, romance, found family, politics, drama. It has it all. And it's just wonderfully told. I'll be starting A Court of Mist and Fury this month as well. Alright, because I enjoyed Love on the Brain so much, I decided to pick up Love Theoretically the moment it came out this month. And I gotta say, this did not hit the mark for me. I gave it a 3 stars. And so let me start with the things that I really enjoyed about this book. So Ali Hazelwood is really incredible at writing really lovable characters. The detail that she adds to each character's personality, at least like her female leads, is incredible. Like, I loved B in Love on the Brain. And I absolutely really enjoyed Elsie Hanaway in here as well. This is about 2 physicists, so it's very academically heavy. It's her most academically heavy book, which I personally really enjoyed. I know nothing about physics, but I just enjoyed reading about that academic world. And it's about Elsie, who's a theoretical physicist, and her arch nemesis, Jack Smith, who is an experimental physicist. And there is this feud in the industry between theorists and experimentalists. And it was good. It was funny. And again, I'll be talking more about it in my Red Flags in Romance book, but what really put me off this book was just this constant size comparison between the two. So she's super tiny, teeny tiny, dainty, and he's this huge, massive, broad, tree-like guy. And just that comparison had me feeling so gross and so uneasy. It really tainted the book for me. If it wasn't for that, if Ali Hazelwood just painted a picture of 2 normally sized humans, I would have loved this book a lot more. I just could not look past that trope. But if you don't enjoy like the academic setting, you're really not gonna like this. It's very, very academically heavy, but it's still fun. The character I loved the most from this was Cece, who was Elsie's roommate, and I think Cece deserves her own novel. She's in literature doing her PhD at Harvard, and her character was so lovable. She's so quirky, she's so weird, reminded me of Phoebe from Friends, and I think she deserves her own main story. That was my favorite character to come out of this rom-com. Alright, and the last book that I read in the month of June was We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib. It's a queer Muslim memoir. Samra Habib is a Canadian journalist from Toronto, and this was really her memoir. So I'm not usually a fan of memoirs. I don't really read them, but just something about her story being a South Asian woman, a Pakistani immigrant, and then also identifying as queer, and what her life was like growing up in Canada in a traditional Muslim family just really appealed to me. And I gotta say, this memoir is absolutely fantastic. It's very quick. It's fast paced, and there's just so much I think that you can relate to her story as maybe like a minority, or as a marginalized person, or as an immigrant, or even a child of immigrants. It was really incredible. It was really relatable. It was actually very, very heartbreaking, a lot of the things that she had to go through, and just her journey of resilience and strength and adversity. And I don't want to say more about it because I don't want to give it away. Even though, I mean, this is a real person, so you probably know their life already if you know who she is. But I would really recommend this memoir to everyone because she was able to perfectly, in my opinion, capture the complexity of growing up a brown woman in a Western country, living a dual life, and now also having the added complexity of being queer and not having a gender identity that is in line with what is culturally and I guess like religiously expected of her. So I thought it was lovely. I really enjoyed reading it, and I would recommend it to everyone. All right, everyone, that's all the books that I read in the month of June. If there's any on here that sound interesting to you, definitely pick them up and let me know your thoughts down below, and then I'll see you in my next one. Thanks for being here.